ते काय प्रदूषण बोलतात ना, ते प्रदूषणच्या प्लॅस्टिकचा पण परिणाम या समुद्रावर होतो. आणि आधी की जास्त थंडी पडली ना का मच्छी शक्यतो दूर होते, लांब होते. आणि जास्त मोठ्या प्रमाणात म्हणजे जी नेटची जाळी असतात ना, नेट की पावसाळ्यात जे मोठ्या मोठ्या बोटी वापरतात, समुद्रात जातात, ती अंडीच त्यांची म्हणजे पावसाच्या मेमध्ये किंवा ह्याच्यामध्ये जे येतात ना अंड्याचा पावसामध्ये, ती अंडी ते खलास करून टाकतात. त्यामुळे मच्छीचं हेच कमी झालं, बी बोलतात ना, हे जरा कमी झालं त्यामुळे. आता कालांतराने दुष्काळ असेल तर दरवर्षी जाहीर होते, पण आमची कागदपत्र नसल्या कारणाने ती दुष्काळ निधी आम्हाला भेटत नाही. त्यांचं पण विषय, तुमचं मच्छी मारण्याचा परवानाच नाही तर तुम्हाला कुठल्या बेसवर आम्ही अनुदान द्यायचं. खरं म्हणजे कोळी लोकांची जी आमची जात ती जवळजवळ आता नष्ट व्हायच्या ह्याच्यात आली. कारण का, आमच्यामध्ये नवीन पिढी ह्या कोळी धंद्यात कोण पडत नाही. कारण आमची वडिलांची शिकवणच अशी आहे का ह्याच्यामध्ये पडू नको, तू नोकरी तिकडे 20,000ची नोकरी कर, पण ह्या समुद्रामध्ये. कारण समुद्राचं जे धन बोलतात ना, सोनं समुद्राचं, ते मच्छी तीच कमी झाली. त्यामुळे ते यांचं आमच्या समाजाचं. आणि दुसरं गोष्ट म्हणजे आमच्या समाजाला, या आपल्या भारताच्या ह्याच्यामध्ये समाजाला व्हॅल्यू शून्य किंमत आहे.
Being out on the highway in the dark with all these trucks and buses around it, it always takes me back to my childhood. I practically grew up on the NH8, the highway that would lead from Mumbai to Gujarat, because at the time my father used to run a restaurant, and so it would always be very late at night, close to midnight, when it would be family time for us. And oh, how I would wait for him to come home and announce that we were all going for a drive, and then very quickly we'd hit the highway. In his first car, which was a carbureted Maruti 800 BLD 8394, it was a white car. And then a few years later, he bought a 5-speed fuel-injected 800 that was MH04 BK6751. That's the car I learned driving on, in fact. And I just have very fond memories of being sprawled across the back seat of those cars. I'm sure a lot of us have our formative driving memories in a Maruti Suzuki. I mean, it wouldn't be inaccurate to say most of us have had an 800 in our family at some point.
आताची पिढी शिकेल ती तरी जाईल, नाही तर या धंद्यामध्ये काय नाही तसं राहिलेला. मच्छीच्या धंद्यात काय राहिलेलं ना, कारण मच्छीच कमी समुद्रात होत चालली, त्याला काय काय करणार. हे कसं असते, ह्याला पण काहीतरी बंधनकारक असते. आपल्या सरकारचं बंधन नाही, काय नाही, सर्व कसं पण त्या सरकारला पैसा मिळते, सर्व चालेल.
Just as the sun rose, we arrived at the Revdanda jetty. Being a Monday morning, it was much quieter than on most days, which meant I could comfortably spend a little while with the Kolis, the local fishing community, who, for centuries, have remained committed to their trade of fishing. Humble, warm, and hard-working, this community has a distinct identity, and it's this very identity that's increasingly, as I learned, in danger of being washed away.
We are in a really small village called Agrav, which is part of a slightly larger village called Chaul. Chaul and neighboring Koli are places with some really significant historical context, and some really important events took place here a few hundred years ago, especially. So, as usual, there is no plan as such other than to just sort of sit back and unwind. At some point, we will head out of here, and yes, unlike my previous two outings, this one doesn't involve a motorcycle, but it does involve a Jimny, which is a car I like a lot. The idea behind being here is just about simplicity. And that simplicity hits hard, especially considering how close we are to Mumbai. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour drive at the most. And of course, much closer to here is the beach town of Alibag, which is a very popular holiday destination.
A short afternoon nap later, we decided to head back towards the sea to meet some more of the locals. This time, a bunch of retired old fishermen.
पण आता माझा मुलगा आहे, मी विचार काय करते, मी जो आता हा धंदा करते तो माझ्या मुलाला नको, शिकला का तो बाहेर जाऊ. म्हणजे काही कालानुसार हा ऍक्टिव्हिटी हा धंदा पण बंद होणार आहे. पहिल्या म्हणजे होतं ना 40-50 वर्षापूर्वी एका गावामध्ये 4-4, 5-5 फूट अशी नेमकी अशी मोटर पोहोचले एवढे, तोच काल येणार आहे परत. ते नेटवाले आता अंड्याची ते मच्छी मारतात, सगळी मोठी ते मारतात आधी परत घन झाली जाऊन ती बारकी मच्छी पण कवलून आणतात.
अच्छा, असं आहे.
The conversation was easy to settle into, but the signs of duress they were under, not so much. Rapid industrialization, insensitive encroachment in the name of development, and unethical fishing practices by large corporations are now angling for the Koli's trade and, therefore, their very existence. I wasn't mentally prepared to leave a place as beautiful as this with a sense of gloom. But if I looked the other way and pretended all was well with the world, it would be very dishonest of me. All I could hope for was to find some sort of silver lining.
Not to digress, but I am quite grateful I brought the Jimny here because I'm sure you can tell how narrow the roads are here, and you have to be very cautious because there are children and puppies and little chickens and just the narrow track of the Jimny and how narrow it is generally in its width is quite helpful here. गाडी मस्त आहे. हा काय तुम्ही ट्युशन करताय? मग गाडी बघायला बाहेर कसं आलंस? फोटो काढ लवकर.
It wasn't much by the way of a silver lining, but a few kids I met outside of a coaching center did give me something to chuckle about, even if just for a moment. These kids were enamored by the sight of the Jimny, and the fact that a modern-day mass-produced car can get kids reacting like that is something of a special quality. Typically, it would take some sort of a classic car like an old Beetle or a Mini to do that, but the Jimny clearly wears its charm on its sleeve. It took that small a moment of comic relief to ease my state of mind, and I really hoped I'd wake up the next morning to see things a bit differently.
Right, so what's happening here, let me try and explain to the best of my knowledge, is that those people there are waiting for the fishing boats to come in. When the boat comes in full of whatever is the catch of the day, there's a massive and a very aggressive auction that happens, and then the people who buy that auction are basically the ones who line up here to sell them to people like me. And it looks a little bit quiet and calm right now, but I assure you, the moment a big enough boat comes in, which I think there is one here now. I wrongly assumed that that boat had left just, earlier this morning. But those guys have been out at sea for the last 4 days. And proportionate to that kind of time, the amount of fish they've actually captured is, in their words, quite poor. It's nice to see that they haven't lost their zest and in some cases their sense of humor. हे काय?
तळायचं मी त्याची तळलेली टेस्ट पण तुम्हाला द्या तर ते कोकम लावले. हा तुम्हाला जे आम्ही फिश देतो ना त्याच्यात फिशचा स्मेल तुम्हाला असं येत नसतो.
येत नाही. अच्छा, हा, बरोबर.
तो ह्याच्यामुळे कोकमामुळे.
We set off yet again towards the sea, this time to soak in the history of Chaul. 500 years ago, Chaul, a significant port controlled by the Portuguese, was a town of immense prosperity. Large vessels from around the world, full of life and color and riches, would line up here, and it was on these very shores that the world got a whiff of India at its glorious best. It was only a couple of centuries later, when Bombay was passed down as dowry to the British, that Chaul began to lose its importance. Today, Chaul is a shadow of its former self, kept alive purely by its people and hope. History, though, always has a lesson at hand, and set against the context of a land everyone believed was invincible, my thoughts soon drifted towards some of our own privileges, cars, especially ones we've grown up with. Think about it. Maruti alone has given us cars like the Zen, the Gypsy, the Esteem, which was a motorsport darling, and in recent years the Alto K10, the Swift and the Ignis, and now the Jimny. Okay, so it would perhaps be inaccurate to call them intently enthusiastic cars. It really was just a case of us making the most of what we had. But this history, unintended as it may have been, deserves to be celebrated. The Jimny, for one, is a great representation of all things Japanese. Yes, it's clever and supremely capable, but most importantly, it has a personality. There's an old school purity to it without being crude, thankfully, and that makes it a proper future classic. Ever regretted not buying that Gypsy when you could? Told you, history always has a lesson at hand.
ते मच्छीचं हेच आहे, कारण जे समुद्रामध्ये ज्या टायमाला जे बंधन करते कोण, गव्हर्नमेंट बंधन करते, अमुक अमुक टायमिंगमध्ये मच्छीला जायचं ना, तरी पण काही काही मोठे मच्छीवाले जातात. हे मूळ कारण हे आहे. त्या जे पावसाळ्याच्या सीझनमध्ये मच्छी शक्यतो मारली नाही पाहिजे. जी बाहेरून ती अंड्यासाठी जवळ येते मच्छी, ती मारली नाही पाहिजे. आम्ही पारंपरिक मच्छीवाले, ते पारंपरिक मच्छी आम्ही पारंपरिक पद्धतीनेच मच्छी मारायचा प्रयत्न, आम्ही अजून ते नवीन नवीन प्रयोग करतो, पण इतके नवीन नाही. आणि जे आता फिशरीज ऑफिस वगैरे आहेत, ट्रेनिंग असते त्यांची, म्हणजे गव्हर्नमेंटच्या यांनी, ते त्यांनी ट्रेनिंग आमच्या लोकांना दिलं तर बरं होईल. कारण का हल्ली कसं नवीन युग आल्यानंतर नवीन युगाप्रमाणे पण चाललं पाहिजे. ते शिक्षण वगैरे त्याने दिलं पाहिजे आम्हाला. थोडं प्रत्येक गावामध्ये येऊन किंवा आमच्या सोसायटीला हे करून द्यायला पाहिजे. एखादं चांगला शिकलं तर पहिल्या काळामध्ये नोकरी वगैरे चांगली मिळायची. ST सर्टिफिकेट असायचं तेच कॅन्सल केलं. त्यामुळे आमचे ते काय माहिती आहे, आता हे नोकरीचं प्रमाण कुठे राहिलं नाही आमच्या समाजाला. का कुठे चांगल्या ऑफिसला एखादं शिक्षण जरी चांगलं झालं तरी भेटत, फक्त शिक्षणाच्या ह्याच्यामुळे भेटते, आमच्या समाजाच्या बेसवर काय भेटत नाही.
I spent all of yesterday talking to locals, primarily from the fishing community here, and the problem of survival is a real problem. And in the face of that, what we go through in our everyday life seems this small. I was burdened by everything I heard about all the unethical practices and everything that's not quite going in their favor. But then I also believe that these are people of the sea. They've seen things you and I can't imagine. They've coexisted with the sea for centuries now, for generations. I strongly feel that these people will figure something out, because they have the sea by their side. And sure, the challenge this time is real, and it may have far more serious consequences than anything before this. And the sea knows how to claim what is its own. So I'm sure these people will figure out how to turn the tide in their favor.
Our story in Chaul transitioned, perhaps unexpectedly, into one about evolution. But having absorbed this reality, what we can say is that evolution, taking the Jimny as an example, needn't necessarily come at the expense of being true to oneself, of sincerity. All you need sometimes is a bit of hope on the horizon.